Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all warm, safe. I hope you have electricity. I haven't lost electricity yet. I have lost internet, and it looks like my water is trying to give out on me. Anyway, this is some crazy stuff. Never seen it quite like this. But we will soldier on, okay? I realize some of you might not be able to watch this on Wednesday if you have no power or something like that, or no internet if you can't access YouTube. Try your phone maybe. I got a hotspot on my phone. Anyway, we're gonna go on and continue learning. We're moving now to module 11. I will be sending to you a quiz. Did I send that already? Anyway, you have a quiz. Is that right? Yeah, you should have a quiz to take. And that should be getting. If I haven't sent it already, I will send it to you. Okay, and just bring it with you next week. Okay, we're going to be learning about muscles and skin now. And here we go. Remember this from last time, that the superstructure is the skeleton, the muscles, and skin. So bones, muscles, and skin. And I had you write that down in your book somewhere. So make sure that you have that written down. So hint, hint on that one. Okay, so talking about our muscles. Muscles are what allow us to move. They're attached to our bones. We learned about our bones last week. Okay, so they move with the skeletal system. I believe you're supposed to fill in these underlined words here on your workbook. And remember, if I'm going too fast, you can pause the video and and take the time to write your notes down neatly if you like. Okay. Muscles can only contract, so they work in pairs. So what this means is that muscles can make themselves shorter, smaller, and then the only way they get longer is to passively be stretched. So think about this. If you make a muscle with your arm, okay, the top muscle right there should be bulging up nice and big like mine, and that's called the biceps muscle. Well, while that is contracting and bulging up, the back side of your arm has a muscle called the triceps, and it is relaxed and it is being stretched passively while you move that bone upward, okay? Now, if you stretch your arm out straight to your side, your biceps is now relaxing and your triceps is contracting. It doesn't bulge as much on that side, but they work in pairs. So my biceps and my triceps are working together to move my upper arm. Now, we know about joints. They allow the bones to move in certain directions, but muscles actually move the bones. Okay, they do the work. We know how those different kinds of joints are, right? There's the ball and socket and the hinge and the ones we talked about last week. I'm going to show you a special condition of muscles on this in just a minute here. We have over 600 muscles. You don't need to know all the 600 muscles, but there are a few that I'd like you to know. I'm probably going to concentrate more on you knowing bones rather than muscles. Okay, and the brain, of course, is in charge of everything. Our muscles that are moving our bones are called skeletal muscle, and they are voluntary. We can choose to move those. We have other muscle tissue in our body that's not voluntary. For instance, your heart. Let's watch a little video. Oops, gotta go back, sorry.
Three types of muscles are contained within the human body: smooth, cardiac, and skeletal muscles. Smooth muscles are found in the walls of many organs, such as the stomach, and in blood vessels. They have a non-striated appearance and contract involuntarily. Cardiac muscles are found in the walls of the heart. They also contract involuntarily but have a striated appearance. Skeletal muscles are attached to and move bones. These muscles contract voluntarily and have a striated appearance. Skeletal muscles are subcategorized into 4 distinct groups based on the orientation and arrangement of their muscle fibers. Parallel skeletal muscles consist of fibers that are arranged in parallel to the line of pull during contraction. Parallel muscles can be subcategorized based on their shape into quadrilateral, strap-like, and fusiform. Convergent muscles contain fibers that have a wide origin, but converge in order to attach to a narrow tendon. Circular skeletal muscles are made up of fibers that are arranged in a circular manner. They are found at points of openings where the contraction leads to a closure of that opening. Innate skeletal muscles consist of muscle fibers that are attached to the sides of a tendon in a manner that is similar to a feather. Pinnate muscles can be subcategorized based on their shape into unipinnate muscles, bipinnate, and multipinnate.
Okay, so that's a really good video, but I'm sorry the music was so loud. I hope you could hear what he was saying. It's showing you that we have these muscles. There's so many different shapes and sizes of muscles, and the way they're named, oh my goodness. Some of them are named by where they are. Some of them are named by their fascicles. That's what he was talking about, those striations. He called them striations. Striations. Some of them are named, you know, by how large they are, how small they are, that kind of thing. And so let's just take a look at some of them. We'll look at the face in some detail in just a minute. But right here you can see, for instance, in that last video you saw on the shoulder right here is something called a deltoid. The deltoid is called that because it's shaped somewhat like a triangle. And the letter delta in Greek is a triangle shape, sort of like we've talked about the delta of a river, right? Check out the trapezius. That's this back muscle that comes here to here, and I think that's supposed to be, according to somebody, a trapezoid shape right there. It's on both sides. If you've been doing some lifting, like I lift all of my gear up into my car, and I tend to overstretch my trapezius. So if you have like a neck ache and reaching down your back right there, you might be overusing your trapezius right there. These right here in the, we're still looking at the back right here, we have something called the external oblique muscles. So the oblique muscles are going at an angle. So the oblique angle right there. I wish they labeled these right here. These are called the latissimus dorsi right here, the lats that are in your back. These would be the muscles you would use if you were rowing a boat. So picture your arms moving and rowing your boat, and those latissimus dorsi would be involved in rowing those oars. Sometimes you may have noticed the men's gymnastic team when they are at the Olympics. The men who have this incredible ability to with control over their back muscles and upper body muscles. I will say that men's upper body muscles are more developed and stronger than female. That's just the way it is. But they do this one routine where they're on a set of rings. Do you know this? These rings are hanging from the ceiling, I guess. And then they hold on to them, and they're able to hold their arms straight out, very still, and then move themselves up and twist around and all this crazy stuff. You know, the women don't have that routine because they can't, their upper body can't develop that way. But those guys end up with very large latissimus dorsi. You may have noticed their back gets kind of winged back there with all those muscles they've been developing because of that that exercise, the rings right there. All right, we all know the gluteus maximus. That's called that because it's big, but under it is the gluteus medius, and under that is the gluteus minimus. If you've ever had a shot in your rear end, it's right here in the gluteus medius that they try to get that shot in there. You can see on the back of the legs here, this set of 3 different muscles, the biceps femoris, the semitendinosus, and the sorry, I can't say that word. Those 3 work together to form something in the back of the leg called your hamstring. All right, we'll look more closely at the gastrocnemius in a minute when we look at this, the Achilles tendon right there. Let's go to the front now. We can see here, there's that deltoid again. Oh, look, they show the latissimus dorsi from here, but it's that muscle, and you see it right there. In our arms, we have our biceps brachii. Now notice it's called the biceps brachii. That's because biceps is referring to the shape of the muscle. Biceps means it has 2 heads. So the top of the muscle actually has 2 parts that come off and reach into a tendon that goes to attach to the bone up there. Okay, so when we say that we have the biceps brachii, I'm sorry, I pointed to the wrong one earlier. It's right here, okay? Brachii means having to do with the arm. That's Latin for arm, okay? So we have a biceps femoris too, 2 heads on it, and it's over the femur, at the femur, okay? So we have to know where it is. If I say it's my biceps, well, which biceps? The one, you know, my brachii or my femoris? And there's others, no doubt. And then our triceps is the back side of the arm, okay? It's pointed kind of strange there. It's on that back side. I guess his arm is shaped that way. Okay, there we go. Here, going from the above the elbow over the top of the arm down to the wrist is the brachioradialis. So brachii, once again, arm, radialis, the radial, remember the radius is that bone right there. Okay, our 6-pack right here, our abdominals, these are called rectus abdominis. Abdominis means where it is. Rectus means straight. It means that these fascicles are going in straight lines, okay? So you've heard the word rectify. That's to straighten something out, to fix something, right? So that's where these names come from. Let's see on the front. We're going to go now to the facial muscles, which are pretty fascinating. Humans, as you know, have a wide range of facial expressions, and it's because of this intricate musculature of our faces. Okay, so let's start at the top. This is called the frontalis, okay, and it actually is, if it is the moving muscle, if you're going to raise up your eyebrows, you'll move your frontalis, and it connects to the muscle in the back called the occipital muscle. So we call it the occipitofrontalis, the whole thing. So when you raise your eyebrows up and that muscle is contracting, you can actually feel down on the back side of your head that muscle, which is being moved and relaxing, if you will. I love these round muscles, these circular muscles that go around. This one goes around your eye. It's called the orbicularis oculi. So orbicularis meaning it is round, oculi meaning around the eye. Now wink your eye, or you can, if you can't wink, you can just close both of your eyes really tightly. You can actually feel that circular muscle making that circular closure right there. We also have the orbicularis oris, so the round muscle around your mouth. So oris has mouth. So if you purse your lips as if you're going to whistle, okay, then that's where you'll feel that muscle, that round muscle right there. Now, interestingly, that muscle, the orbicularis oris plus the buccinator right here, those are called the kissing muscles. That's because that's how you purse your lips, you perk up your lips to make a kiss right there. So the buccinator, interesting name, and the orbicularis oris. All right, this one right here along the side of your jaw is called the masseter. The masseter is one of the main muscles used for chewing, so it helps your upper and lower jaw work together to chew your food. All right, let's see. We have our levitator labii. Labii means lips. Levitator means to raise up. So levitator labii superioris right here, and I guess the zygomaticus right here. Those are called our smiling muscles. Those are the muscles it takes to smile. All right, if you smile, you can kind of feel those. Notice they're kind of small muscles, yeah, and they pull the edges of your lips upward. Meanwhile, down here, there's a large muscle, very large muscle called the platysma. It actually reaches all the way under your jaw right here. It's sort of like covers from this side of your jaw on both sides and underneath to the neck, even down here. That's called the platysma. And that's the big muscle that you need for frowning. Okay, so it is true that you need more muscle or a bigger muscle to frown than you need to smile. So there you go. Go ahead and smile. Those are the ones that I'm mostly interested in on the facial muscles. You will be, of course, responsible for whatever your book is asking you to look at. Make sure and do your study guide for this module. All right, I told you earlier I wanted to talk about this special kind of musculature. This is the shoulder. Okay, remember the shoulder joint has a ball and socket joint. Here's that ball, here's that socket right here. And I told you that a ball and socket joint has a large range of motion. In fact, it has the greatest range of motion of all of the joints that we have. We have it in our hips as well and in our shoulder. But because the range is so good, the stability is lower. They're not as stable because they can move so far. They're not as stable as, say, the knee, which has much more stability. And so in order to keep it in place and to give it stability, there's all this musculature that must take place. So there are these set of 4 different muscles that make up something called the rotator cuff. You may have heard of it. You may have heard of somebody who had a rotator cuff injury. If that was the case, that means they had a muscle injury in one or more of these muscles. All right, so they are the supraspinatus, so no supra above the spine. We have the subscapularis. Remember the scapula? That is the shoulder blade on the back of you. So that's under the shoulder blade is where that one ends up. You can't see where it goes here under that way. We have the infraspinatus, so next to close going toward the spine, and the teres minor. Typically when you see something called minor, that means somewhere there's something called that major. So we do have a teres major. Turns out the teres major is in the upper arm. It assists with the ability of the biceps brachii to do its work. All right, we're going to look at these, the way they're attached here in just a minute. Yeah, right here. Here it goes. So the way the muscle's attached, we're going to use the calf muscle as our example. This is called the gastrocnemius. Notice how it has 2 large bellies and 2 heads. So it's got a biceps going on as well here. And it joins down here. So notice it's very red right here because muscle has a lot of blood supply to it. So it's very red. If you've ever had steak, that's the red muscle of a cow. All right, so muscle is very red. Now, as it moves down the muscle, you can see it starts to get white here. That's because this muscular tissue, remember there's 4 types of tissue, one of them's muscular, it actually turns into connective tissue, a different kind of tissue here. One of the big differences between muscular tissue and connective tissue is blood supply. So a lot of blood supply to muscle tissue. There's no blood supply to connective tissue. That's why this tissue is white. There's no blood supply. It can't be very thick because it needs to get nutrients to it, so it has to be thin in order for the nutrients to, by the process of osmosis, just move into it from the blood supply in the muscle right here. Okay, so it has to get it from the muscle, and it just kind of floats up into this area here. Now I want you to notice on this side it shows it beautifully how the muscle turns into the tendon. And now look at where the tendon is going. The muscle is over this bone, right? Your lower leg bone, your calf area. But the tendon is going to attach below the joint. Here's the ankle joint, and it's attaching to your heel. How about that? In order to get the ability to use my lower leg as a lever, like stand up on your tippy toes, for instance, that's a lever action to make this muscle use your bone to stand up. I must have that tendon attached beneath that joint right there to give it the leverage. Notice also it goes over here, and right here a new tendon is, you can see it on this side a little better. A new tendon is forming at the top of the muscle. That tendon has to attach above the knee joint in order to get the leverage that you need. Okay, so that's an important concept to understand, that our tendons attach to the bone beyond the joint. Okay, if it attached to the bone before the joint, like say right here, I wouldn't get any lift from this bone. All right, it wouldn't lift it properly. So it has to lift it from below or above if we're at the top. Okay, so I told you the different kinds of muscular tissue that we have. We've been talking about skeletal muscle. That's the first one here. The video said it was striated. The word is striated. It's right here. These little lines going right here. Oh, and then you can see the nucleus here and there. Those little lines are very interesting. They have the mechanism by which the muscle contracts. Okay, it turns out there are these little things called sarcomeres in there that slide past one another. It's quite a fascinating mechanical situation that goes on there. And in order for it to happen properly, it has to have a cascade of biochemical events, which means many things have to be in place before your muscle can even contract. And right now, you're probably moving your muscle. You're not even thinking about it. And all that stuff happens automatically inside of you without even thinking about it. It's a miracle. It's quite amazing. Our cardiac muscle is different. Notice it still has striations in it, and it has these intercalcated discs right here. That's how you mostly can tell the difference between the two. And of course, the larger nuclei right there. And that's because cardiac muscle is especially specialized to, in fact, if you take some of the muscles off the heart, it's the muscle that's found in the heart. If you take some of the tissue off the heart, just the tissue by itself, It is so specialized, the tissue will beat. It will actually beat like the heart beats. Okay, so it's very, very specialized. It's only found in our heart. So it's known as cardiac. That, by the way, is involuntary muscle. That means you cannot just decide with your mind to stop beating your heart, which is very good, right? We don't want to do that. We don't have to think about it at all. You can decide to move your skeletal muscle. You can move your arms, your legs, that kind of thing. Sometimes you do it unconsciously, but you still are deciding it. You know, if you reach over to slap a mosquito off of you, you didn't even think about, I'm going to move my arm over, but your brain did that for you, and it was still voluntary. Thirdly, we have something called smooth muscle. You can see over here, it does not have the striations. It contracts a little differently, and we find that in smooth muscle, like for instance in our esophagus. So the esophagus is a muscle-lined tube that you put food into your mouth, and when you swallow it, the muscles of the esophagus push your food down into your stomach. We'll have a whole unit about the digestive system, and we'll learn all about that kind of action right there. But what you need to know is it's involuntary, so it happens automatically. When you swallow, yeah, you can spit the food out, but there comes a time when you make that swallow and it's going to go down no matter what. And furthermore, we'll discuss this later, that if you're standing on your head or if you're in a non-gravity place like up on the space station, it will still go down to your stomach because the muscle will push it down through this really cool process called peristalsis, which you'll learn about later. But other things like your stomach, for instance, has smooth muscle, which causes your stomach to move around and to help digest your food. Your intestines have smooth muscle. Those move your food along through the system right there. All right, so that's smooth muscle. So of these three, really only skeletal muscle is the voluntary one. So what about muscle control? Okay, our smooth muscle, you don't think about, that's in the smooth and cardiac. Our skeletal muscle, you controlled it by thinking it. We do have something called cartilage. If you bend your ears, you can feel that flexible. That's called elastic cartilage. But if you move the tip of your nose or higher up on your nose, there's some harder cartilage right there. There's three different kinds. You'll learn about those another time. But elastic is one of them. Hyaline another one. That's at the top of your nose. And then furthermore, the ones that cover the caps of your bones. So when our bones are moving past each other, there can be some friction, which can cause some pain or damage. And so they're covered with this cartilage, which allows for smooth movement there. Furthermore, the joints we talked about a little bit last time, there's actually a fluid between them called synovial fluid, which also works to lubricate those joints. And then ligaments, we know, connect bone to bone. We saw that last week. And we saw today that tendons connect muscle to bone, always past the joint. All right, let's watch this fun little thing about developing your muscles. Oops, I did that again. Sorry.
Muscles. We have over 600 of them. They make up between 1/3 and 1/2 of our body weight. And along with connective tissue, they bind us together, hold us up, and help us move. And whether or not bodybuilding is your hobby, muscles need your constant attention because the way you treat them on a daily basis determines whether they will wither or grow. Say you're standing in front of a door, ready to pull it open. Your brain and muscles are perfectly poised to help you achieve this goal. First, your brain sends a signal to motor neurons inside your arm. When they receive this message, they fire, causing muscles to contract and relax, which pull on the bones in your arm and generate the needed movement. The bigger the challenge becomes, the bigger the brain's signal grows, and the more motor units it rallies to help you achieve your task. But what if the door is made of solid iron? At this point, your arm muscles alone won't be able to generate enough tension to pull it open, so your brain appeals to other muscles for help. You plant your feet, tighten your belly, and tense your back, generating enough force to yank it open. Your nervous system has just leveraged the resources you already have, other muscles, to meet the demand. While all this is happening, your muscle fibers undergo another kind of cellular change. As you expose them to stress, they experience microscopic damage, which in this context is a good thing. In response, the injured cells release inflammatory molecules called cytokines that activate the immune system to repair the injury. This is when the muscle building magic happens. The greater the damage to the muscle tissue, the more your body will need to repair itself. The resulting cycle of damage and repair eventually makes muscles bigger and stronger as they adapt to progressively greater demands. Since our bodies have already adapted to most everyday activities, those generally don't produce enough stress to stimulate new muscle growth. So to build new muscle, a process called hypertrophy, our cells need to be exposed to higher workloads than they are used to. In fact, if you don't continuously expose your muscles to some resistance, they will shrink, a process known as muscular atrophy. In contrast, exposing the muscle to a high degree of tension, especially while the muscle is lengthening, also called an eccentric contraction, generates effective conditions for new growth. However, muscles rely on more than just activity to grow. Without proper nutrition, hormones, and rest, your body would never be able to repair damaged muscle fibers. Protein in our diet preserves muscle mass by providing the building blocks for new tissue in the form of amino acids. Adequate protein intake, along with naturally occurring hormones like insulin-like growth factor and testosterone, help shift the body into a state where tissue is repaired and grown. This vital repair process mainly occurs when we're resting, especially at night while sleeping. Gender and age affect this repair mechanism, which is why young men with more testosterone have a leg up in the muscle building game. Genetic factors also play a role in one's ability to grow muscle. Some people have more robust immune reactions to muscle damage and are better able to repair and replace damaged muscle fibers, increasing their muscle building potential. The body responds to the demands you place on it. If you tear your muscles up, eat right, rest, and repeat, you'll create the conditions to make your muscles as big and strong as possible. It is with muscles as it is with life. Meaningful growth requires challenge and stress.
Okay, so you can see there how we're going to build our muscles. So we're going to talk about healthy muscles and how we keep them healthy. One of them, of course, is to remain active, right? They say that sitting is the new smoking. I don't know what that means exactly, except that it's not healthy for us. And we do a lot of sitting these days. So getting out and moving is good for your muscles. So what about foods? What should we eat for this? Now, we'll learn about in our digestive system module about the types of foods that we eat. And one of those types is protein. And proteins will provide us with the amino acids which build muscle tissue. So the best thing for muscles is plenty of water. Make sure you're completely hydrated. That is definitely good for all of our tissues. And here's a few things that are good for muscle building. So these, most of these contain a substance called omega-3 fatty acid. So some people think fats are bad for us, but really fats are not bad for us. It's when we use these complex carbohydrates that end up being fattening, if you will. So as long as the fats are good fats and not, junk food, then we're good. So one of the best fats out there, and I believe God's gift to the planet, is right over here to the right, the avocado. Oh my goodness, they're so good for us. They're filled with all sorts of great omega-3 fatty acids. They also have good fiber for us, which is helping in our digestive system. So you'll see also lots of nuts. We have pecans, almonds. These are called hazelnuts. These are walnuts. So all types of nuts are good for muscle building. That's because nuts have protein in them. They're also easy to grab for a snack. I will say that the best way to eat your nuts would be raw and organic if possible. Some of you might say, gross, yuck, I want salt on my nuts. Okay, so if you want salted roasted nuts, they're not as good, but they are still good for you. So go for that. We see here beans. So beans are also a source of protein. These look like kidney beans. But any kind of bean, those are all legumes, right? Legumes. We see salmon right here. That's a type of fish that's really high. Most fish, especially wild-caught fish, is very high in omega-3 fatty acids, which once again are very useful in keeping not just our muscles strong, but really the rest of our immune system and everything strong. We see olives over here in olive oil. So olive oil is good. I will say, that cooking in it isn't as great as eating it raw. I try to swallow a little bit of raw olive oil every day. I just swallow it because I'm not crazy about it, and so I just get it over with. But you can make your salad dressing with it You know, making salad dressing is very, very easy, so you can do that yourself. But some people will just rely on something like this. These are supplemental, probably fish oil capsules, which contain all that, so you can get it without having to eat all this great food right here. So supplements, often people are using, and those will certainly help. All right, so that's our muscular system. Now we're going to move to something known as the integumentary system. That's a long word to say skin, basically. So it's our skin, which is our largest organ in the body. You may not think of skin as an organ, like we think of the heart or the liver as an organ, but it is, and it's the largest, heaviest one in our body because it covers all of our body. But here it is, 15 to 20% of our body weight is skin, but it also includes hair and nails. Okay, so our hair and nails are part of the integumentary system, and we'll look at all of these. What are the functions? I believe you're going to write these down. Number one is for protection. Okay, so if you think about it, our skin is protecting the inside of our body from things getting into it, you know, bacteria or other diseases that might try to sneak into our body, right? Our skin is a barrier, so it protects us. It also is waterproof, you know, so it protects us from getting too much water in, like a sponge. We don't swell up like a sponge that way. Also think about our hair for protection. Did you know that your hair on your head is part of the reason you're kept warm? Yeah, it keeps us very warm. In fact, babies, when they're first born, a lot of them are bald, right? They don't have any hair. And so if you've noticed, before they come home from the hospital or from the birthing center, they have a little cap on their head. They always put a little hat on their head. That's to keep their warmth in because they don't have as much hair. Yeah, also our nails, think about our nails. Those are for protection. They help us to grasp things. They will also help, you know, scratch, right? They scratch and itch type of thing. Also for sensation, we will find, we'll see here. In fact, this reminds me, I'm going to send to you another paper that has a printout of the skin, and you're going to fill that out to name all the things that are happening inside of our skin. Okay, but what's happening in there is we have little nerve endings and other type of tissue in there to help us feel the sense of touch, you know, and we'll get into that in a little more detail in a second. The other is heat adaptation. So it's our skin really, it's got a lot of blood supply just beneath that upper layer, which is the epidermis. The dermis has blood supply. The epidermis does not. We'll get to that. But it helps us to adapt to the weather. Okay, so if you think about it, when you're outside and you're running around and you get all red, you know how you turn kind of red? It's because blood has rushed to the surface of your skin to cool off. Okay, because that also what we're going to be putting out is sweat, and that sweat will cause, when wind blows across it, it'll evaporate, and evaporation causes a cooling. So it cools us off. Our blood is there to get cooled by that sweating process. Very cool. When we're cold, it's a little different. It's our muscles really causing us to shiver, which brings up our body temperature. Okay, symbiosis, remember what this is? This is working together. Remember bacteria, can it live on our skin? Yes, it does. Symbiosis is when two or more species coexist and at least one of them benefits. Do we have a symbiotic relationship with bacteria? Absolutely. If you were able to get close enough on your skin right this minute, you would see it teeming with millions of different bacteria that are on there. But guess what? Those bacteria are keeping you from getting infections from other things, namely other bacteria or fungi. So you can get fungal infections on the skin if you don't have the right amount of bacteria. This is why I personally am not a big fan of hand sanitizers. Okay, the reason is it's got all sorts of alcohol in there and I don't know what else it is, mostly alcohol that does it, that kills the bacteria on your hands. Now, I understand if you are in a place like the grocery store and you've touched a bunch of stuff and you're worried about COVID and this kind of thing, you put that bacterial on your hand, you put that sanitizer on there, it's going to take some of that stuff away, right? But it's also going to kill everything that's normally on your hands. And that stuff's good for you. It also really dries your hands out. You may have noticed that if you have a friend, I had a student who used to love to use hand sanitizer. She used it like, 50 times a day. And her hands were like chapped. It's because all the oil on her skin, which is there to protect her skin, had been wiped away by all that alcohol. All right, so I think the best thing to do instead of using a hand sanitizer is just to wash your hands with soap and water and that washes away the bad stuff. Your stuff is more embedded into your skin. It stays for the most part there and replenishes fairly easily. You know, so that's just my little preaching for the day. All right, skin is made up of epithelial tissue. It is, we're looking actually at a slide of some epithelial cells right here. You'll notice that they touch each other. Okay, so as soon as they touch each other, they know to stop growing. That's called contact inhibition. You can see in the middle is a nucleus, and even some other stuff you might be able to see inside there. Here we can see some slides of layers right here. So on this side underneath here, we call this the dermis, and this upper part is called the epidermis. We're going to get into the details there. Here. Okay, this is the sheet I'll be sending home with you. I'll email it to you, okay? And you're going to fill in what each of these things are. So we're going to end up talking, I'll give you a hint, this is hair. And we'll see here is our skin, our epidermis right here, and our dermis. And you'll be filling all this in. I will, at the end of this lecture, have the answers up here for you. So you should have that printed out, I guess, by the time you're watching this. And you can fill those in at the end. The words are on your page, so you should be able to figure it out without it, but I will give you the answers. Okay, so what are the functions of skin? We talked about this. Protection. Remember, it's a barrier. The first thing is it's a barrier to keep things out. All right, but it also protects from other things. That barrier would be the mechanical part of it right here. Okay, mechanically, it's keeping things out. And it's also protecting us from UV damage. UV stands for ultraviolet light. And you've probably been in the sun in the summertime. You know, we here in Texas, we don't do this cold very well, but we do like our sunny summers. So it turns out that we have this protective type of cells called melanocytes, which we'll get to in a minute. And they help us to minimize damage from sunlight. Chemical would be, literally, if you have chemical spilled on your skin is there to keep that from getting further into your body. So it may burn your skin a little bit, but by the skin warns you, right, by having pain, and you go wash that off, and you protect the rest of your body. It can be, the bacteria we have growing is antibacterial to pathogenic bacteria. Desiccation means to dry out. So our skin is literally keeping us from drying out. If you think if you didn't have your skin, right, you would actually lose all your fluid through your through your body, from your body, where your skin used to be. People who have had burns, they burn away that upper level of their epithelial tissue, and it causes fluid to leak out. To the right here, we're looking at a cancer, a skin cancer called melanoma. It's probably one of the most serious cancers out there. And so you can see it usually is some sort of dark spot on your skin that has irregular borders. Here you see the border irregularity right here. They're asymmetrical, not perfectly round. Color can vary within there, and then a fairly large diameter. When you have this problem, sometimes sun will cause this to get worse. Okay, and so if you see, you know, any kind of suspicious type of growth that's dark like this and fulfills these A, B, C, D thing going on here, you might want to get that checked out by a dermatologist. So a dermatologist is a skin doctor. All right, here we are talking about sensation. We'll have a better picture of this in just a minute. You can see here's our epidermis, very layered right here. Epidermis right here. Dermis down here. We can see some nerve endings coming up here. These are just raw nerve endings. We have, this is a type of a feature called a Pacinian corpuscle. We have Meissner's corpuscles as well. We'll get to some more detail on this in just a minute. But it helps us to have the sense of touch. We have, you can feel things on your skin, right? You can feel pressure if someone's just poking you, maybe gently, you can feel that. You can also, if they're poking you really hard, you can feel pain. If they scrape you or even stick something sharp into you, you know that because different receptors will pick up different things. There are receptors that pick up heat and cold. You can tell if something feels cold. If something's too hot, you touch it and you move your hand away very quickly to keep from getting burned. That's all in your skin. Heat adaptation, remember I talked about that, about sweating. So you can see that here. Here's a sweat gland, and it comes and opens a pore directly to the surface of the skin, and it's literally water with a little bit of salt in it that comes to the surface, and then of course it will evaporate. The flow here causes about the evaporation causing you to cool. All right, that evaporation taking place right there. We also have oil glands right here around the hair, and that actually puts oil onto the surface of the skin, which keeps your skin moisturized. It also comes out onto your hair, which keeps your hair moisturized. So people tend to panic about greasy, oily hair. Actually, that's very healthy hair when it's got that oil on there. Notice our blood vessels here. They are in the dermis. Right here is the epidermis. We'll get to that. No blood supply there, so it has to be thin in order for nutrients to get to it. Here gets a lot more detail, okay? So here is our hair follicle. That's called a follicle. Around it we have a epithelial tissue holding on to it. Here you can see the gland, the oil gland right here. It's called a sebaceous gland. And then notice our epidermis. It's got lots and lots of layers, but it's relatively thin. Then comes our dermis, which is thicker. It's got all the action in it. Blood supply, nerves, these fancy things. This one's our Pacinian corpuscle. Do we see our Meissners in here? There's our sweat gland. This is called the erector pili. This is a muscle that helps your hair stand on end. Oh, I like this right here. Look here. They've peeled the epidermis away from the dermis. You see that undulating or that bumpy surface right there. Those are called dermal papillae. Here's our Meissner's corpuscle right here. Free nerve endings. All right, so remember each one of those have a different job to do. Underneath the dermis is the hypodermis. This is where our adipose tissue is. Somebody asked about fat being on our body. So it'll be in this tissue right here. Now, each of us, even skinny people, will have a fat layer right here. It's needed, right? We need that fat. But this is where we'll add extra fat on if we have that, or too much even right there. That's adipose tissue, so it's beneath. Somebody asked about the 7 layers of the skin, so we would say it's the hypodermis, which isn't really part of the skin. It's really connective tissue, but that's okay. Hypodermis, we have our dermis, and then we have 5 layers of the epidermis. I guess that makes 7 right there. Okay, the structure of the stem. Let's talk about that epidermis. So remember I showed you it was kind of thin, and it's avascular. Remember that word? Avascular. It means no blood supply. Crazy. It has to be thin so that the blood supply from beneath down in the dermis can get the nutrients up to at least the bottom layers. We'll look at the upper layers. It's replaced every 35 to 45 days. It's constantly going through mitosis, constantly going through growth and pushing up, pushing up, pushing up. There are 5 distinct layers. Let's see if I'm going to talk to you what this keratinized means. Okay, that's the very top layer right there. It's completely keratinized. So that word keratinized, keratin is a type of protein that the skin itself produces. Let's see if my next slide shows it. No, we're going to dermis. Okay, so I just need to explain this to you. The keratinized at the 3rd layer, okay, so we have the base layer is very, very thin. In fact, 1 line thin, 1 line of cells thin. It's called the stratum basale. It's the base, the stratum basale. Then it moves up to the next one, stratum granulosum, stratum lucidum, and it goes higher and higher and higher. In the 3rd layer, the cells start to produce keratin. Keratin is sort of a waxy substance, and that waxy substance actually ends up smothering the cells and killing them. All right, so the last 3 layers, the middle of the 3rd, and the top 2 layers are completely keratinized. They're completely dead. You probably knew that. Those layers are dead. They look like this. They're very flaky. If you rub your skin, you can see some flakes of skin coming off. That's normal. That's called sloughing. They slough off to, by the way, this is a very, very close-up picture, like 2,000 times the way it really looks. That's why it's so crazy looking like that. Those keratinized cells are about to slough off, and then new layers, of course, would come up from beneath to replace those. All right, so notice that we have that bumpy layer right here. The reason that's like that is so blood supply can reach up to there, okay? That's increasing this surface area so blood supply can get to this avascular tissue of the epidermis. Notice we have a pore for our sweat gland right here. We have blood supply coming in. We have a hair shaft. Here's that muscle called the erector muscle that helps the hair stand up on end, when you feel that on the back of your neck when you're kind of scared, that idea there is it traps air under there and helps to keep us warm. Here is our adipose tissue right here. Now that bumpy layer right there is interesting, okay, because it's almost like you've laid a sheet over the top of something bumpy. So like if your mom asks you to clean your room and you throw everything on the bed and then throw a sheet over it, she's going to come in and she's going to know that everything's just under that sheet, right? Because she can see all the bumps. Well, that's the same thing with our skin. So look closely. Here, we call it the dermal papillae right here. See how they have very bumpy right there? And this thin thing is just laid over it. And what we can see are our fingerprints. So look at your fingerprints and those bumps right there. The bumps are actually coming from the dermis. Those are our dermal papillae or papillae. And they are making those bumps, and our very thin epidermis is laying over that. And as you know, our fingerprints are very unique to each person. Today for lab, you would have been putting your fingerprints on your book. I have some ink pads, and you would have been making your fingerprints there. Our hypodermis is underneath. It's called the subcutaneous layer. You may have heard of somebody giving a shot sub-Q. That's when they're going into the subcutaneous hypodermis. Remember, it's not quite a part of the skin system. It's below its connective tissue, but it does serve to give us insulation, making us warm. It cushions us. That fat is giving us cushion, and then some of our sweat glands reach way down into there. Here's our hair. It's coming out of the follicle, okay? The hair has the part that comes out called the shaft, and then the part in here called the root. The part you can't see really is called the root sheath. And then you can see down here, the only part where there's living tissue is right here. And this matrix right here is part of that living tissue. There's a nerve ending that comes right here. By the time the hair gets up to the shaft right here, it's dead. It's all dead skin. It's all completely keratinized. It's a different kind of keratin. It's called hard keratin. The keratin on our skin is called soft keratin. So there's a lot that one of the big differences is in our hair that hard keratin contains something called sulfur. So if you've ever burned hair accidentally, you can tell because it has that terrible, terrible smell. The smell is sulfur. Down here at the bottom, there's a little nerve, like I said. So when your hair gets cut, like you go get a haircut, there's no pain, right? That's a good thing because it's not alive. But down here, if you pull your hair out, that causes pain. That's because there's a little nerve right here, and also a blood supply right here, just down here at the bulb of the hair. If you look at it very closely, you can see on the here are those overlaying tissue of keratinized cells that are dead, and then inside you can see there's actually concentric rings. In the middle we have the medulla, and then the cortex surrounding it, and then the cuticle is the outer portion right here that has this appearance to it right here. And hair tends to grow. We know this, right? Have you ever noticed, especially girls, you might notice, you brush your hair and there's a lot of hair ends up in your hairbrush and you're like, oh no, I'm losing my hair. I'm going bald. No, it's just fine. It turns out that's natural. We have these growth spurts for our hair. So generally, about 90% of our hair is in this phase right here, okay? So it's called the active growth phase, or anagen, and they're producing that hair, and it's staying in here. But comes time, about 10% of the time, we're actually going to lose that hair. All right, so it's going to dry up here in this phase and dry up some more and then be released, okay, like a leaf falling off of a tree. So it's normal. So about 10% right now of the time, okay, any time, about 10% of our hair is actually in this catagenic stage. All right, so it's going to fall out. So when you see that hair coming out, then you know that 90% of your hair is okay. It's in this. And guess what? Look, there's a new hair forming right there that's going to grow into a new hair like that. So that's normal. So you also might wonder, well, I've got hair in my head and I've got hair in my eyebrows. Why are my eyebrow hairs not as long as my hair in my head? Well, that's because our hair goes through a growth period and a rest period. So right here in our active growth area, we'll have long periods of rest. All right, and so, but they grow longer. I have more rest period in the hair on my eyebrows and my eyelashes and even on my skin. Okay, so they're resting more than their growing stage, where our hair on our head is growing more than resting stage. Why God designed it that way, I don't know, but I'm glad. I'm glad we don't have really bushy, hairy eyebrows, right? Okay, oil glands versus sweat glands. I just wanted to show you here. Our sweat glands release straight to the surface with a salty water solution. whereas our oil glands release always into a follicle of the hair to help moisturize the hair and then moisturize the surface of the skin right there. Okay, and those are called sebaceous glands. And it has oil in it, kind of a waxy oil actually. Melanin, I mentioned this earlier, down in the lower stratum basale right here, which is the lower layer of our epidermis, there are these specialized cells called melanocytes, and those melanocytes have color in them. It's kind of a tan color, in fact. So it protects us against UV damage. It causes our skin to tan during the summer. You've noticed that if you get more sun exposure, your skin will become darker. And that's the melanocytes proliferating, making you have tan skin. And that tan skin is protecting you from damaging UV rays from the sun. Okay, so that's called melanin. Some people have naturally more melanin in their body than others. That gives us the wide range of skin colors out there. Some people, their production of melanin isn't as active as others. So you go out in the sun and you get burned and it peels off and you're white underneath there. I have one son who's very fair that way. But most of my family, we tan very easily because our melanin production is really good. Remember that thing, that skin cancer we mentioned earlier called melanoma. That's an overgrowth of melanin cells, and which can be very dangerous, of course. Also, I want you to know that vitamin D is converted in your skin when we get out in the sun. So I think sun exposure is very good for us. In fact, we've discovered now, especially with this COVID deal, that vitamin D is very influential in our immune system. And so therefore, we need vitamin D. And so I understand getting sunburn. We don't want to do that. But I've never been a fan of sunscreen because it doesn't let us get any sun on our skin. It keeps it away. And it doesn't allow us to get our vitamin D that way. So I think to keep from getting sunburn, I'd rather wear a shirt and a hat, that kind of thing, and then just get in the shade, right? Not stay in the sun too much. But it really is good for us to get a little sun exposure. On a day like today, which happens to be sunny, even though it's very, very cold outside, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go get a little sun exposure. If you can stand the cold, that is. Yeah. Okay, what is skin like on other organisms? I believe you have a little chart to fill out in your book. This is in our book, in our textbook, about how while we've been talking about the integumentary system of humans, other animals have other things. Mammals, for instance, they mostly have hair. In fact, we're mammals and we have hair all over our body, even though it's not furry for the most part. Most mammals are more furry, but think about an elephant. They're not furry, but they do have hair on their body, and they're mammals. Amphibians have smooth skin. They need to have, wetness around them, and that's because they actually breathe somewhat through their skin. Fish and reptiles have scaly skin, and birds, of course, have feathers. All right, so you can fill those in. If I went too fast, you can pause the video. All right, so here are the answers for that extra page I sent for you. So here you can fill those things in. The words are also on your page. They're not, I didn't show you the whole page here. And you can fill these in. Also, if you want to color these things, that might be nice. You could have, your hair, the color. If you have blonde or brown hair, you can color that in. And remember, our dermis is vascular, so it would be maybe pink, and our epidermis is avascular, so maybe it would be not pink, right? That kind of thing. Yeah. So you may want to color those. It might be pretty. Bring them next week and show them to me. All right, so for our lab, what we'd be doing is I want you to do that skin printout assignment right there. We'd be making fingerprints like I mentioned. We'd be testing our muscles a little bit with a muscle fatigue test. We can try that next time. And then you would be looking at some slides under the microscope. And you draw those in your book somewhere. Okay, gang. Well, I hope you were able to get this, and I hope that you're staying warm once again. And next week, we'll get back together. Surely this crazy cold snap will have stopped by then. Okay, enjoy. Stay safe. See you next week.